Welcome to the Fiber Girls Show, a podcast committed to connecting communities and accelerating businesses through fiber optics. Now, here's your host, Tanya Bohannon.
When it comes to connecting communities and accelerating businesses, there's a company in Greencastle, Indiana that goes above and beyond. My guest tonight is Matt Silbert with Crossroads Communications Solutions. We are so excited to talk with you, Matt. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Before we start talking fiber, Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been in the business for about 21 years. I started out as a field service specialist with GTE back when GTE was actually a thing, installing and maintaining some of the first fiber networks, the DWDM networks. And since then, I've kind of grew into outside plant roles. And then most recently, I was with Duke Energy doing their internal fiber. Then I decided to go out, strike out on my own and do my own thing. And here we are.
We're excited to talk to you today and find out a little bit more about what you're doing out in the community, but also ask you questions based on your experience. So I know you're actively involved with the NTCA, the Rural Broadband Association, and you're passionate about fiber in rural America.
We are.
So what's being done to make that happen?
There's several things. The NTCA is doing a great job of promoting and lobbying on behalf of rural co-ops and really making everybody aware that there is that digital divide outside of the major cities and suburban areas. So
we've been talking about fiber in rural America on some of our previous podcasts. What would you say is one of the most important reasons we need fiber out in the smaller communities?
I think the proliferation of the Internet of Things is going to necessitate a serious broadband connection for almost every home and every business, sometime in the very near future, if not already. So the way business is getting done and the way people are learning, on even the elementary school level, almost every student has some kind of tablet or digital device that they have to do homework on. So
one of the things I found is most interesting also, I don't think we think about this, or a lot of people don't, but let's think about those farmers out there doing their job, harvesting corn and using software out there. They couldn't do that if they didn't have a connection.
Yeah, I think the importance of that real-time monitoring and production control is, a broadband connection enables all that. Being able to store the data and analyze the data in the cloud or even on local devices, but you need to be able to collect that data and do it quickly, and going out and taking soil samples or crop samples manually and then writing it down in a notepad, it doesn't work anymore at the pace that the world economy operates.
How are we going to get that signal out into rural America? What does that look like?
Well, there's a couple of ways. A lot of the rural co-ops, both electric and teleco, are deploying fiber optics so that you can get up to a 1 gig or even higher, in some case, fiber connection right to your home or business out here. The other thing that's going on for the places where it's not quite cost effective to deploy fiber is using fixed wireless access or wireless internet service providers, or also called WISPs. They're also helping kind of bridge that gap between the fiber backhaul and fiber service and otherwise unservable areas.
The most common method of wireless backhaul is using microwave systems or satellites. What do you foresee the best way to go about that?
So I think first and foremost, getting fiber everywhere where it makes sense and where it's physically possible. For those other instances, using, there's all sorts of creative ways to deploy those wireless radio systems. You can use existing cell towers, which are everywhere now. You can't turn in a direction hardly and not see one. There's other things you can do, like using the tops of grain silos or really tall barns or existing, some of the two-way radio communication towers that are in place from, municipalities or other utility operators or the farmers themselves. So.
Well, will you have to have direct line of sight, or can it go through the trees, or there's going to be a lot of obstacles out there?
Line of sight is pretty important. There are some new technologies out there that have been developed for use in more military applications that line of sight is not quite so important. But with radio signal, like everything else, you're going to have rain fade, you're going to have line of sight issues. So, the circumstances have to be just right. but it's better than not having any connection or just, a bonded copper pair DSL solution.
So being connected with the NTCA, the Rural Broadband Association, what is the benefit of that?
So the benefit is that you get to be directly involved with policy suggestions and kind of best practice development that gets taken directly to Capitol Hill for when they try to develop legislation or, have input with the FCC as far as the, means and practices go. And that's, people that have been in the business for 20 some years like me have an idea as the best way to do things and the best way not to do things. So taking all that input and consolidating it is pretty invaluable, I think.
As a small company like yours out here in Greencastle, and you have a heart to make sure all communities have fiber, are you aware of grants, or is there money out there to help put all of this fiber into place?
Yeah, actually the FCC has done a great job of making funding available, as has the USDA. Right now, the current funding round that's available is called the RDOF, or Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. There's $20.4 billion over the next 10 years for the deployment of rural broadband. It's going to be out there for reverse auction, I think, starting this year. But, the goal is to use those funds and an additional $600 million from the USDA to bridge that digital gap that I mentioned before.
Is that available for smaller companies or just anybody that is interested in deploying that fiber?
So basically anybody who provides a digital broadband solution, that's electric co-ops now, that's the telco co-ops, that is wireless internet service providers, are all eligible for those funds. What
does that mean to the public? Is there anything important that we should know as fiber continues to grow into those smaller communities?
I think the important thing for the general public to know is that if you are unserved or underserved, you need to make it known that that is your situation. There's an estimated 30 million people that are or underserved in the country still. So that condition isn't going to be cured until those numbers are made known in whole and where they are.
Yeah, no, that's good information to know as a smaller community too, because that gives you direct access to your online banking, to healthcare,
Absolutely.
To being alert and knowing what's going on in the country, having that connection.
Yeah, a lot of people out here in rural areas still don't have access to cable TV either, or satellite. So, you get a few of your local network channels over the air, and that's it.
So it's a pretty big project, making sure these communities have fiber. And I know, like we talked about, the United States is interested in making sure that happens. It's just a matter of time. Let's go back to that wireless backhaul. What kind of frequencies, or what frequencies will be used for that connection? And are they FCC regulated, or are we using unlicensed frequencies?
So a lot of the wireless internet service providers are using the unlicensed frequencies. I know there's been some exploration using the TV white space frequencies, which I think is 600 and somewhere around the 600 band. I'm not a radio expert, so I'm a fiber guy, but so in that area is where that growth is happening.
As a company that is working hard to make sure we get that connection out into the communities, what's the most challenging aspect of engineering that fiber design?
It's probably working within the constraints of the geographic areas that the providers have designated as ready to receive these services, because it's super easy to look at the map and go, oh, another half mile down this road, but now you're into someone else's ILEC territory, or you're in another electric co-op's service area. So just trying to not pick up one more house, one more road, or whatever. That geographic constraint's the challenge.
And that's what your company does well, the engineering design portion of it.
That's correct.
How do you even begin, though, when you're looking at that connection and where you go? You just look at the great big map?
Yeah, it all starts with a map, trying to find, there's some design considerations that they teach you with doing rural fiber to the home. And, you have a few things you look at first and foremost. One is your geographic center, then is your center of your population density, and then everything else basically. But if you got to try to center your equipment and your distribution hubs from those two places and find the happy medium and then make it work from there.
There's been a lot of talk about signals in the air and frequencies in the air, and the more wireless connections we put up, the more we have to be concerned of that. Has any of that come to concern with you in the work that you do?
So I think the biggest concern is how everything's going to play together, whether or not we're going to have interference, whether they're going to have, compatibility and whatnot. So that I think the interoperability is the big concern right now.
It's an exciting time for smaller communities, for people in the industry to have faster connections. There's a lot of talk about 5G. How do you think that's going to affect across the country? So
I think the major metropolitan areas and the densely populated suburban areas are going to benefit greatly from 5G. I mean, that you're cutting the cord there. I mean, you're not going to be tied to your house where you have your Wi-Fi modem and all that stuff. I mean, you're going to be able to have gig speeds everywhere you go on your mobile devices or even, in your laptops. I don't see it benefiting the rural areas so much, just simply because of the shape of the 5G signal. It doesn't make for, it's not a good solution where your subscribers are sparsely populated. Well,
for those smaller companies that are out there listening to us talk about this fiber in rural America, can you give us some advice or direct us to a place where we can go to learn about funding? Would you recommend the association you're connected with?
So yeah, there's a few of them. The NTCA is a good resource. You also have the NRECA, which is the National Rural Electric Co-op Association. And then you have the NRTC, which is the National Rural Teleco Co-op. And then the NRECA they all have a lot of good information. And then, of course, just the FCC and the USDA both have a wealth of information as far as the funding and what the plan is to know what. You can always see what their plan is and then kind of figure it's going to be a 3 to 5 month delay before your provider gets it. So
what's the hot topic for CCS, Crossroads Communications Solutions?
So CCS, we're focused on helping as many rural communities and as many rural co-ops do this as possible and not limiting ourselves to telephone companies, but also the electric co-ops. Another thing that I like to think we do is we help facilitate some communication between the parties that know how to do this and the parties that want to know how to do this.
Do you guys have a website?
It's xroadscommunications.com.
That is X as in the letter X?
The letter X, correct.
And what kind of information can we find on your website?
There's a good overview of who we are and what we do and a few of the projects we've worked on.
It's an exciting time for fiber in America and being able to get communication out there into the smaller communities and the farmers and being able to use software and people being able to access all of that information. Is there anything important or on your mind you still would like to talk about before we close?
I think we've covered it all.
So we're going to end this podcast now, and on the next episode, we'll be talking with Matt about dark fiber and what that means to the community and what is dark fiber. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We always love spending time with you. Please leave your feedback and share this podcast with your coworkers and friends. If you're interested in doing a podcast with us, you can find us at Tanya@thefibergirlshow.com. That's Tanya@thefibergirlshow.com. Thank you so much for taking time to listen. And thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Tanya.